Okay, so here we are in lesson 11. I'm going to try to keep this one a good bit shorter than the others have been to give you a little bit more time to work on some of the upcoming assignments and impending due dates. So today we're going to be talking about establishing and maintaining collaborative relationships and conditions and contexts of communication with parents and families more generally. Okay, so your student task list has shrunk for this lesson, although don't let it fool you. You still do have a good bit coming up, but simply watch and follow along with the video. And instead of your practice demonstrate assignments, your QQC and your self-reflection, I want you to just really pour your time into your family involvement and communication plan and any other things that you need to finish up. So working on your research paper if you'd like, putting finishing touches on the communications experiments that remember is a reflection and a video submission. Whatever you need to do to finish up those types of assignments, use your time the way you need to. Okay, so some things to consider when discussing establishing and maintaining collaborative relationships. Now, there's a lot in that title. That's why the title's so long, I guess. But establishing is the initiation of a relationship. Maintaining is the sustaining of that relationship over time. And that's not flat and static. That's continual and renewing and engaging. And collaborative is a really key word here. So we're going to be really working toward moving away from the stuck kind of teacher leading, teacher on top, teacher is the complete authority, into a more collaborative range so that the parents and family more generally are more involved. Because as we'll see here in a moment, a lot of research points to high correlation of student success in a lot of different ways through collaborative treatment of families. It's really important for the schools and the students to succeed in their education. It's been shown that schools with stronger partnerships between families and also between communities have a list of benefits. So children have better grades, better attendance, better behavior, and more improved social skills, and a higher promotion rate. That means they kind of move along grade to grade much easier. Research also shows that parental involvement is really important in closing gaps between minority and low-income students. So rather than taking other approaches to shrink that gap, bringing the families, the parents into being more collaboratively involved seems to be one of the best ways to improve that type of situation. Father involvement is also something that research strongly points to as being a very vital part of full collaborative family involvement. So teachers really are the kind of linchpin or the hinge point for the communication between schools and families and schools and other community members also. Teachers have a big job and their expertise spreads out quite a lot, from one-on-one to student to groups of students, to behavior management and classroom management, to more school atmosphere and school culture kinds of projects, and then branching out to the community and the families. So the teachers serve that central role to swing around all of those areas of education. And part of what a teacher's duty will be is to increase their sense of awareness of what it is that what groups they're talking to or they're trying to communicate with. So understanding possible or potential boundaries to communication as led to by different diverse groups or diverse backgrounds will be really important. And it's actually the responsibility of communication does fall in large part on the teacher. The communication efforts are shared throughout the school in an ideal setting, so administrators are reaching out, other staff members, say secretarial kinds of staff members are reaching out, but the teachers are on the ground and moving with the children. They're the most direct path to knowing most about the families and then communicating appropriately. When discussing warm schools, it takes effort to make a place like a school especially warm. Schools are institutional buildings in most part. They're not like a home where you walk in and there's lots of lamplight and rugs all the time and things like that. You actually have to put a lot of effort into making the tile floors and the cinder block walls, as schools often are made of, welcoming and warm. So part of what you can do is set up certain procedural elements of the school that allows people to feel that there's a predictability and a comfort. So a safety issue, of course, is always at the forefront. So making sure that all visitors are sort of funneled through a certain avenue, and that is the front office. That's the place they're greeted. That's the place they're registered and accounted for, and that's the place that they can be guided then through the school in the ways that might be most welcoming. Putting effort, as I mentioned, into the physical environment or the way that it feels as you walk into the group of people is really important and would take a lot of different forms. It might also be suggested that, especially in certain locations with higher demographics of non-native English speakers, that signs might be bilingual or multilingual, and then that would really depend on where you are. I know some places, say here where I used to teach in Spartanburg District 1, that's in Landrum, Inman area, there happens to be a high percentage of Ukrainians and Russians, Eastern Europeans, and so there's a different kind of language barrier there, and in other places there may be more Hispanic-speaking cultures represented there, or other types. So a really, of course, helpful thing to make a place feel welcoming is welcoming demeanors, welcoming attitudes. So smiles and welcome and warm language is going to be something that will make a big difference as a person walks into a big school, and especially if they're there already with a tentative attitude for various reasons. Maybe they're have had terrible experiences with schools. Maybe they're distrusting of establishments like schools in general, and you're kind of having to work through a lot by presenting this type of welcoming attitude. Things like open houses can be really great to be icebreakers for that kind of thing, and open houses can serve a lot of different functions in that way, and they're helpful because they can be designed really specifically. So in an open house, the traffic, so to speak, is really guided by the school, the teachers and the administrators, so they can set up the schedule, the paths that the parents and families will walk, to make it more amenable for them, to make it more warm and more friendly for them to, say, walk by certain parts of the building with welcoming bulletin boards, or to have people placed in certain areas to give them those smiles and to direct them to different places in the building. Home visits is another thing that, especially and most often with younger grades, like those children just entering into, say, preschool or the earlier grades, can be very effective in establishing early that collaborative relationship that can be maintained throughout the year and throughout subsequent years, especially if there's sibling groups from individual families. It's often the case that it's a part of the routine with preschoolers, so it's just kind of part of the curriculum in a certain sense. It really aids, if done properly, in opening up personalized kinds of relationships with the families. It provides a lot of insights also as you walk into another person's world, into their homes, and you perceive what it's like to be around their family members, to see where the people sit and eat, to maybe even see what parts of the house the child is frequenting, and then watching the child in interaction with their family while they're at the home. They're all very useful pieces of information, and it's really strongly encouraged to take a lot of notes while you're there, especially if you're hitting house after house in a day or two. Writing down a few anecdotal notes to remind yourself about what the impression was like, and you're reminding yourself what the child is going back into when they leave your classroom, and what they're there, where they are when they're at home through the rest of the night and in the early morning. There are really good recommendations in your text on page 267, the Family Schools Communities text. A lot of it has to do with just checking your boxes with professionalism, and but also to try to get as much as you can out of those moments. And there's, I think it's an art to doing that, to being comfortable in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people, and learning in real time to kind of move through that comfortably and convincingly, and so to allow the families to feel accepted and welcomed. It can be also helpful to pair new families with existing families in the school to allow them to transition a little more easily. So let's talk about some contexts and conditions of communication. So by contexts, I mean places and times, right? So sometimes we meet with people in various ways. And the conditions are basically what you and what the families bring to that interaction. So formal meetings might be something like parent-teacher conferences, other more formal meetings like IEP meetings, and those things are really well planned out. They should be really well planned out. You have to know what you come with, what purpose it's for, the time boundaries, the subject boundaries, and you'll need to know how to handle conflict and how to present issues or difficult topics too. There's a really good several resources in your text about how to run a meeting. I think one's on page 290 of Family Schools and Communities that I suggest to go along with your communication plan I'll discuss later. Informal conversations are a little more diffuse. They might be something like just simply bumping into the parents as they pick the child up or drop them off. Meetings as they might, conversations as they might walk through the halls, or if you see them out in the grocery store or something like that. You handle it differently, of course, than when you see them in a more public, formal setting. But there are different guidelines you might follow, like how to maintain a professional stance in a less professional environment, something like the grocery store or bookstore or something like that. How you're going to structure the topic that you discuss, how you're going to make sure not to become overly social in certain ways, because there are boundaries between teacher and parent relationships, and that should be really protected. So, teachers might befriend parents of their children, but it should be something that they really do with discernment and care, so that the child's experience of their teacher is intact and held carefully. Phone calls can be used for lots of different things. Check-ins are really good ways to use phone calls because it's a lot easier than scheduling a meeting, and it allows them to feel like you're continually reaching out to them, and it doesn't take that long usually. There should be a really good balance of calling because of issues and calling just to simply say how great the kid is. The parent's response to a teacher phone call, if possible to be avoided, shouldn't be, oh no, my son or daughter's teacher's calling again. It's like, what did they do this time? It should be like, wonder what they have to say today, and it would be great for them to be eager to talk to you. And then a good bit of the time, if your message to them was your kid's doing great, they're catching up with this stuff, they're really following through here, they're making great friends, they're playing really well, this is something we're working on, and all things are really good right now, just wanted to let you know. The parents really appreciate that. They feel encouraged, and then that encouragement trickles down to their children. Letters and emails I want to make mention of, because the way that text is presented to parents through letters or through any written communication is really important to be cared for. Professional writing style should be very carefully maintained so that you're representing your range of expertise as an educator and protecting that, in addition to representing the school. And there should be the purpose that you have for that writing should be well thought out. So the purpose should be reflected, of course, in the length, the content, and the overall impression that the letter or email might give. Some other types of communication you might consider are things like questionnaires and surveys. You can get a lot of information from that, especially if you give them to a lot of parents. Different things like if you have handbooks or homework, anything that the student does at home that the parent might need to look over, a simple communication that way through a sign, a signature, or a quick note. Bulletin boards or other things like newsletters and websites, this is like a one-directional, a unidirectional communication where you're presenting things for the parents and families to perceive or to have communicated to them, and they don't necessarily immediately feed back, although the feedback does come through their impression of the overall message that those things are giving. Okay, so a little bit more specifically on some formal meetings, some items about formal meetings and parent involvement. So make sure you invite both the parents so that there's an inclusivity and a collaborative attitude about it. Make sure you offer various times and times during the day and different days to try to accommodate as much as you can parent schedules, especially with difficult, if parents work 2 jobs, for instance, or if they have odd hours. Make sure that the children know why you're meeting. It shouldn't be a big mystery that they're biting their nails, worried if they're in trouble. Make sure that they're part of it in that way, is to the extent that they need to be, so that they can be aware of it. It's really important to come with some materials to share. So you as the teacher would definitely need to have a list of things that you would like to address or to share with them. And I've mentioned the sandwich technique, which I'll mention again, but that's a good way to handle difficult topics. So you present something really positive, you include something that's been a challenge, and then you round it off with another really strong positive thing about the child or their performance. Encourage parents also to bring questions, to bring comments or concerns or anything like that. Make sure that parents continue to make notes of things that they want to bring up to you, so that it's not a big scramble for them to get their thoughts straight. And it would be really helpful for parents to talk to their child before and after the conference to see, okay, this is what you're going to expect before, and then afterward, how do you think that went? That might be something parents could ask their children. So some other things that might involve the parents a little bit more readily. I've given you a list here on the PowerPoint. So some examples include having the parents a part of a student portfolio, for instance, their personal information, something that they contribute to it. Other things like having volunteer time or tutor opportunities or mentorships, things like that. In addition to allowing the parents to themselves be the students, so allowing parents or presenting the parents with opportunities to learn more about certain topics, maybe like parenting or like child education or child development. So working with specific or selected family groups is something you're going to need to pay attention to. So there's a great chart on page 290, I think I mentioned this earlier in this PowerPoint, but there's a great chart on page 290, it's figure 10.6, that gives a great list of some potential issues that you might come across in working with diverse family groups. Now, I've kind of highlighted the word potential in this PowerPoint because it's important to move into a relationship with even the most diverse from you family group with a sense of willingness to move into a resonant relationship with them without preconceived notions of who they are. That's a really tough thing to do. And what it basically does is encourage you to really be careful about the line between potential issue preparation and stereotype. So when we move into a dialogue with someone with an Asian background, for instance, one potential issue might very well be a language barrier. They might speak Mandarin primarily and then have developing broken English. But if we approach that with that attitude or that idea already firmly set, then we're closing ourselves off to what might be actually the case, and which might be more like stereotyping, assuming that they don't speak English well because they are from an Asian descent. So look through that chart. It gives you some good ideas. And also I want you to think about homeless and migrant families. So when you go on a home visit, you should gather a lot of this type of information. But if the child's families are homeless or struggling with homelessness, or if they're constantly moving or have had an influx from another country more recently, you're going to be another linchpin for them or hinge point for them to access resources in the community, and that's really something you should take stock in. So compiling lists of different resources in your area would be a really good idea. There will be undoubtedly some language barriers from people, from families who move in from other countries and cultures, and also financial burdens are often a part of the situation, and this can lead to very heavily increased workloads, and then what can result as what's called toxic stress, which is something that is such an overload of life stress that it actually can lead to a deficit in health, physical health, and that places a large burden on the child and their development. Okay, so that's the portion of the reading that we're covering today. I want to give you three big reminders. So if you are going to be submitting your communication experiments that are due by the 20th at 11:59 p.m., remember you have a video and a reflection to submit. Look back on the previous PowerPoint with that information. I want you to also begin to work on your family involvement and communication plan. I'm giving you that information on the next few slides. You'll have a written submission, and we'll be acting out a role play face-to-face in our meeting during the week of December 3rd. Okay, so I'll get back to you and let you know specifically the time and date when I have a confirmed open room for us. But we're going to be sitting down and going through those communication plans and actually acting out as though you are the teacher for your communication plan and you're leading a conference with me, the parent. Okay? And lastly, your research paper, I just wanted to mention it to you that's going to be due on the 7th of December before 11:59 p.m. also. So your communication plan, I've given you three main portions of the instructions. Respond to the prompts or questions on the next two slides there as an assignment on Blackboard. And I've really recommended that you go back to figure 10.3. I think I mentioned this, but I might have gotten the page number wrong. This is for basically running a conference, parent-teacher conference, page 278. And then also be prepared to act out the scenario when we meet on the week of the 3rd. You'll be acting as the teacher, as I mentioned, conducting a meeting, and I'll probably play the parent. And then lastly, the role play should follow your plan. So use the information in your plan that you construct, that you'll submit as a written assignment, and use that information in the time that we act it out. I want you to focus on active listening and active expression during the role play. That's what I'm going to be watching for. So the written portion is going to be the actual written out plan. And then the role play is going to be using that information to demonstrate skillful communication to me. Okay, so I'm going to be watching for things like body language or nonverbal communication. I'm going to be watching for things like reflective listening, summarizing or clarifying, things like that. I'm going to be listening for any types of suggestions in terms of active expression. Or even things like urging if you feel that would be necessary for the information you present with your plan. Okay, so look back on the previous couple of PowerPoints for a review on active expression, active listening, active expression. So the last two slides here are just the prompts and questions. You can read over them, ask me if you have any questions. Look at page 90 and 91 for a list of do's and don'ts when creating your communication plan. They're just helpful to keep you on the right path through that. Make sure that you're answering each one and give me information, right? When you, for number 7, how you end the conference, don't say, I'll say thanks and goodbye, okay? Like, put more thought into it, give more description and more detail about what that will be like for you, okay? So, I did my best to limit the video, and I'm afraid I failed. So, I tried to get it all in there. Just give me a call or an email if you have any questions about the assignments or about this particular chapter and topic, okay?